Hello everyone, in this video we're going to be talking about the anatomy or the parts of a kidney. Now this is the first part of a sequence of videos I'm going to do called Kidneys for Key Stage 4. So that's who this video is aimed at. And what I want to do, before we look at the sections and their function, it's important to first of all talk about the gross anatomy of the kidney, understand where the different parts are in this excretory system. The job of the kidney ultimately is to control the amount of water we have in the blood, the amount of salts we have in the blood, and the level of urea, which is a waste product, and it comes from excess amino acids. So we have three fundamental roles of the kidney, but before we delve into that, we'll look at the parts. So we're going to start on the left here, and in fact what I'm going to do just, first of all, is just shade in very quickly in this diagram where the kidneys are, and it's these two structures that I'm shading in browny yellow here. Now we have the left kidney on this side and the right kidney on this one, because we remember when we're labelling like the kidney or the heart even, and we look at the chambers of the heart, you label it as if you were imagining that is inside of you. So if this diagram was of me and I was actually in this screen, if you like, my left would be over on this side. So you've got the left kidney there and the right kidney here. Now we've got two, it appears, blood supplies. And this tube that I'm colouring in red here is going to provide an arterial supply to the kidneys. Now, this here is the aorta. It's the biggest artery in the body, and it comes from the left side of the heart. More specifically, this is the descending aorta. And we can see that it branches into two arteries, if you like, one for the left kidney, one for the right. Now, these are what we call the renal arteries. So we can label this here. This is the renal artery. Because when we look at the parts of a kidney, it's important to also consider its arterial and venous supply. So you've got the renal artery bringing oxygenated blood to those kidneys. And then we have this one here, and I'll just colour it in blue, even though we know blood isn't blue, just more for the visual point of view. This here represents our renal veins. So we can label this one here, renal vein. Renal is the proper scientific term for kidney, or referring to kidneys. So we've got our renal veins, and these renal veins will carry blood back up to the heart through, it's called the vena cava, the biggest vein in the body. In fact, I'm going to put brackets because it's the inferior vena cava if we're being picky. So those renal veins will pass into, drain into the inferior vena cava. Now actually what's missing here that I really should include are the adrenal glands, which are on top of the kidneys here. I won't label them, but I'll just draw them in place. So when in my videos where I talk about the endocrine system, an example of that, or a part of that endocrine system, are the adrenals, and the adrenals sit on top of the kidneys there. So let's think about, as we're coming out of the kidneys, because I said the purpose was to control the amount of salt, water and urine, and urea, and that's going to form urine, and that urine has to pass somewhere, and it's going to pass down these tubes. I'll colour them in green just again to highlight them clearly on this diagram. Now these are the ureters. That's the ureter, and you can see they would be passing down into this bit here, which is the bladder, followed by the urethra. So there we have, and it looks like I've missed one label, I think, is this one here. I think that was just to label left kidney. So there we have the overview of this excretory system. Now we're going to delve in a little bit closer. So if we follow the arrow to the right side of this picture, we're going to look at the more microscopic, if you like, structure, inner structure of the kidney. So let's start with number 5, and let's imagine that we've got this arterial blood coming in. So number 5 would represent our renal artery. So number 5 is our renal artery. We can see that's going to provide an arterial supply to this kidney, which would make number 6 our renal vein. Now, if we think of the kidney is pretty much a filtration unit. It's going to filter the blood. So the renal artery will bring the blood at high pressure into the kidney. It will ultimately undergo a process of ultrafiltration, and then there are other processes of selective reabsorption and tubular secretion, and then the blood ultimately will be carried back into the systemic circulation through the renal vein. So you've got arterial blood coming in, high pressure through the renal artery, coming out through the renal vein. Let's put in number 8, because once we've filtered that blood, we said that the purpose of the kidney is to control water and salt levels and urea, and that would form urine, and the kidney gets rid of the urine through this ureter. So that's number 8. Now, number 7 is pointing not just to one thing, but to a whole sort of chunk, if you like. It's this whole section here that I've just labelled. Now, that ureter is almost like an enlarged part of that ureter at the top. This is what's called the pelvis. So this is the pelvis of the kidney. So we've put 5, 6, 7 and 8 in position. So let's look at number 3, because we can see that pelvis almost has a few extensions, if you like, coming off them. So number 3 represents what's called a calyx. So number 3, in fact, this is a major calyx. And then we can see that almost like opens out into a whole region in the centre, and that's what number 1 is kind of representing. Number 1 on this diagram of the kidney represents what are called pyramids, or part of the medulla. So number 1 represents the medulla, or sometimes seen as pyramids. So you've got this kind of inner layer called the medullary region, and then you have an outer layer called the cortex, and that's what number 4 is. Number 4 is a cortex. So for completeness sake, we're left with number 2, and number 2 just represents an outer capsule. So there we have the anatomy of the parts of the kidney. We have the renal artery bringing the blood in, renal vein taking it out. We've got the pelvis, which is in a sort of enlarged upper part of the ureter, and then we've got the ureter that would carry urine leading to the bladder. And then in the main bulk of the kidney, we've got these 2 very clear sort of sections, an outer cortex and then an inner medulla, with an outside capsule around the whole thing. So there's a little bit about the anatomy of the kidney. So in the next section in Kidneys for Key Stage 4, what I'm going to be talking about is the first of the main processes that you get in this kidney, this filtration unit. And in fact, to finish this video, I need to mention one really key term, and it is this here. It is nephron. Now, a nephron is ultimately a filtration unit in the kidney. The kidney, or more specifically this cortex and medulla, is made up of millions of microscopic tubules that are called nephrons. It is these nephrons which we're going to look at in later videos, because different parts of the nephron do different things. And in the next part, we're going to talk about the first section of the nephron, the glomerulus and Bowman's capsule, and look at the process of ultrafiltration. So ultimately, this kidney is full of these nephrons, these specific filtration units, and it's those that are going to do the job. Okay, hope all that helps.